Yep, that's James Wan hitting it out of the park again. Hello everyone, welcome back to What the Horror. I hope you're all doing really well. If you're new here and you like horror and you like movies, don't forget to click that subscribe button, as I'm here for you with movie reviews, rankings, comparisons and deep dives. Today, we are talking about James Wan's Malignant, released earlier this year in 2021. Just a heads up, this review will be including spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film yet, I would recommend you go and watch it first and then come back to the review, and I would highly recommend watching the film first. This is a film that you want to, need to go into blind. Paralysed by fear from shocking visions, a woman's torment worsens as she discovers her waking dreams are terrifying realities. Of course, this isn't really what Malignant is about. Not really, not fully. I think this is one of the films where the marketing has purposely been misleading through film synopsis and trailer to help maintain your full experience of the film, and I'm not mad that they did this. I think that it's nice sometimes to be able to go into a film completely blind without having had anything spoiled by overzealous marketing. So Malignant is a return to horror for James Wan after directing the DC superhero movie Aquaman. It was directed and produced by James Wan and based on the original story idea by Wan, Ingrid Bizyou and Akilah Cooper. Now, for me, James Wan is one of those film creators where I will go and see something they've made just because they've made it. It is the same with Leigh Whannell, it is the same with Mike Flanagan. I don't need to know anything about the film. I don't need to know the story or who's acting in it. I don't need to see any of the trailers. I trust in their talent enough to just go and check it out because their name is attached to it. But I will admit I did watch the first teaser trailer for Malignant, but it was a long time ago when it originally came out. I only watched it the once. I didn't watch any other trailers. I didn't read any film synopsis, and I avoided all review videos and review articles. I just wanted to go into this one, well, not completely blind because I saw the teaser trailer, but as blind as I possibly could do. So before I get into any more of the review, I just want to address the fact that Malignant appears to be one of the most polarizing horror movies in recent years, and people either seem to really love it or really hate it. There doesn't appear to be much middle ground. I personally was in the camp of really, really love it. I really loved this film, but I can look at Malignant objectively enough to see and understand why people might really hate it. It's a very distinct horror film with extremely outlandish and bizarre moments, but having said that, let's look at some of the positives in Malignant. So first of all, let's mention the gore in Malignant. If you are a fan of gory kills and carnage candy, then this is probably a film for you. The gore is really good. I didn't mind it, but I don't mind admitting that the operation scene, I did end up having to watch through my fingers. I'm funny when it comes to gore. I don't mind gore. I can watch it. It's fine until it crosses over into anything that's like everyday reality or anything that's a medical procedure. That's a no from me. So I loved the haunted house setting and supernatural feel of the first act. I know that as the film progresses, they do expand out into other settings and other subgenres, but I think that those first few scenes in Maddie's house were really effective and really nice and creepy. And I also think with the settings, when they do expand outwards from Maddie's house, there were a lot of them that I felt were very reminiscent of Universal monster movies, in particular ones like Frankenstein, but also reminiscent of films like House on Haunted Hill. So I want to talk a little bit more about Maddie's house. Very early on in the film, I realised that even though it's a beautiful big house and it has been beautifully decorated, if you look closer, it's actually really dirty. All of the walls and the skirting boards and the floors, they all have a layer of dirt and grime to them. It's as though the house had initial thought and care put into it, but then it's not been maintained. So this got me thinking, there must be a reason for this. I mean, all choices in set designs are there for a reason, right? So I thought about it, and the only thing I could really come up with was that what if the house was actually a metaphor for Maddie and her husband's marriage? You know, from a distance or from the outside, everything looks nice, everything looks really lovely. But then if you pay more attention and you look closer, you realise that it's not exactly what it seems to be, and there's actually a level of neglect and decay. I could be wrong though, it could mean nothing and I'm just overthinking it. So like the settings, the cinematography and sound design of the film are both really strong as well. I think that the sound design, it reminded me a lot of the sound design from Insidious, especially in the beginning of the film where there was a lot of use of loud and abrupt noises, especially for the horror effect. The cinematography in Malignant is also really stunning. There were a couple of things that really stood out to me. One was the use of light and shadow and artificial light and colours that really helped amplify the horrifying atmosphere that it was trying to create. And another one was a particular shot that stood out to me. It was an aerial camera shot as we follow Maddie running through her house, trying to escape the shadow creature. And I just found it really interesting and really refreshing as well. So while we're talking about technical choices, I want to talk about the use of blue and red in Malignant. It's not the first time that James Wan has used colours within his films. In Saw there were a lot of green and blue scenes, and in Insidious he used red and blue in that one as well. But in Malignant, it's just sprinkled everywhere. In nearly every scene, there are sprinkles of red and blue, from toolboxes to lampshades to towels to ties to shirts to wallpaper to shoe coverings to neon signs. It's everywhere. And there are quite a few examples as well where the blue and red are directly contrasted together. For example, with any of the police scenes, there's the flashing red and blue lights on the police vehicles. A lot of the police staff, I noticed, were wearing clothing that were pieces of red and blue together. And then there's one scene where there is a man stood in his bedroom, literally flanked by a window on either side of him, and one window is lit up red and one window is lit up blue. So I again became convinced that this must mean something. So I ended up falling down a little bit of a rabbit hole trying to research the significance of red and blue. I couldn't find anything concrete in regards to Malignant itself, but I did find some information on the significance of them just as colours. So I did come up with a few theories of my own. So the first one being that red and blue are two primary colours that make one colour purple when mixed together, and I didn't know if that was to represent Maddie and Gabriel being two people but sharing one body, and the second being that blue often represents serenity, stability and calm, and I thought maybe that could symbolise Maddie, and then red is often represented with passion and blood and danger, which could symbolise Gabriel. But again, like the house, it could mean absolutely nothing. It could just be that he likes having colour in his films, but that was my thought. I had to know why it was being used. So I could be wrong, but those were some ideas that I had. Like I said with the house, I could be completely wrong on this. It could mean nothing, and I just wasted about 15 minutes researching the colour red and blue. I also enjoyed the fact that there were lots of nods to other horror films within Malignant, especially other James Wan films. So there were some scenes that were in a very industrial setting, and there was one in particular where there was a spinning fan and it was backlit by green. And then there was a phone call that literally opens, "Hello, detective." So all of these reminded me of Saw and other films from the Saw franchise. Then, like I said earlier, the use of sound, the loud and abrupt noises, was very reminiscent of Insidious, and I thought that Maddie's house was very similar to the house in Insidious as well. And then there were also the little small subtle scares, like the imprint in the sofa disappearing as if somebody has stood up from the sofa. That reminded me of The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2. I also really enjoyed the Scream reference. I don't know if it was meant to be a Scream reference, but it seemed like it was. I mean, you have a character named Sydney climbing in through a bedroom window, which reminded me of Billy climbing in through Sidney Prescott's window. So this positive is more of a personal one to me rather than one specifically to do with the film. But I struggle to be surprised by film and TV's twists and reveals. I'm usually very good at figuring out who the killer is or what the twist is going to be. And sometimes it's nice to actually be surprised by a film. And although earlier on in Malignant, I thought I had figured out that it was Maddie committing the murders, purely because whenever she saw Gabriel, he was always a shadowy figure. But whenever his victims saw him, he had a physical form. And although technically, I suppose I was right, because it is Maddie's body committing the murders, it's Gabriel within Maddie committing the murders. And I had no idea where they were actually going to go with this full reveal. So it was really nice that within Malignant, I had that surprise reveal. I mean, it's rare, it's few and far between. So for me, that was really nice. And finally, I think Malignant does a really good job of delving into our fears. And I don't just mean fears of ghosts and masked killers, but those of our mental health, our memories, and our perception of reality. A lot of the things that we use to define who we are and that give us an element of safety and security. And one explores what happens when these are taken away from us. Okay, now for the negatives. And for me, there were only 3 of them. Firstly, I thought that some of the dialogue and some of the acting was a little cheesy. It was bordering on the Gorgonzola. I mean, there was a lot of over-dramatic line delivery, and there was a large amount of wide-eyed staring. I also thought that the runtime ran just a little bit too long. I think you could have shaved off a little bit of the film and it wouldn't have suffered for it, but it's not excessive. It's still hitting under the 2-hour mark, so it's not too bad. And finally, I had a bit of an issue with the final scene. I loved how Maddie knelt down to her sister and gave her a hug, and these 2 sisters embraced, rather than Maddie, walking over to the hospital bed where she could meet and speak to her birth mother, a person that she has a blood connection with, the one thing that she has wanted for the longest time. I thought it was beautifully done and subtly done, and a lovely message to end the film on. But then came the dialogue, spelling it out to the audience, just in case we hadn't already got the message. It was unnecessary. Okay, so that is Malignant. Now, I absolutely and unashamedly love this film to my core. I think that it is so wonderfully wacky, so wonderfully refreshing, and so wonderfully creative. I cannot wait to watch it again and recommend it to anyone and everyone who is willing to listen to me. However, I do understand and accept it is a love it, hate it film, and I would love to know your opinions and thoughts on this film, so feel free to leave a comment. Thank you as always for stopping by and listening to this horror fan's thoughts and opinions. I appreciate each and every one of you. I see you guys with your views and your likes and your subscribing and your comments. The fact that you take the time to listen and watch and engage, it means the world to me. So thank you again, take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye guys. We are talking about James Wan's, I keep wanting to call it Magnificent. James Wan's Magnificent. I mean, it is magnificent, but that's not its name.